Devin Kelly liked to stalk the girls, never showed no one respect. Beat his wife and cracked his stepson's head. Devin Kelly liked to punch his dogs, drag him through dirt by the neck. That's the man who left 2 dozen dead. But $7 billion are fighting for more guns, lobbies and taxes, tons of campaign fun. But who will fight for mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, daughters and sons whose lives are lost to guns? Devin Kelly tried to buy a gun, but he was stopped by the law till he fooled the store by telling lies. Devin Kelly took his gun to church, dressed like a soldier at war. Devin shot and people dropped like flies. But $7 billion are fighting for more guns, lobbies and taxes, tons of campaign fun. But who will fight for mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, daughters and sons whose lives are lost to guns? Almost everyone who owns a gun doesn't like violence or fights, wouldn't give a gun to someone cruel. Those who make and have a stake in guns say they're defending our rights, selling guns to bums who break the rules. So $7 billion are fighting for more guns, lobbies and taxes, tons of campaign fun. But who will fight for mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, daughters and sons whose lives are lost to guns? Devin Kelly shot 46 people with a rifle that he bought in Texas. Texas denied Kelly a license to buy a handgun, but no license is needed to buy a rifle. A handgun can shoot 6 rounds per magazine. A rifle can shoot 30. It sounds like Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America has their work cut out for them. I believe they will also answer the question posed by my song, Who Will Fight? Kim Long and Molly Malloy are members of the Massachusetts chapter. Please welcome them to Barry's Place. Hi.
Hi.
Like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Kim Long, and I am the Massachusetts State Chapter Leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America.
And my name is Molly Malloy, and I am the State Advocacy Lead for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America.
How did each of you get involved in gun violence prevention?
Okay. Molly, do you want to
Sure.
first?
So I got involved in this movement right after the Newtown shootings because I realized that the kids that were killed that day were the exact same age as my son. And it just became alarmingly clear that there was no reason that these families should suffer those losses, but I wouldn't. And I just became convinced that I could not sit and do nothing anymore. But I had no idea what I could do. Of course, I believe there were organizations out there at that point, like the Brady Campaign, and perhaps Stop Handgun Violence here in New England, but I didn't know anything about those. But I saw a friend of mine posting on Facebook about Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and that resonated with me. And I thought, I'm not a legislator, I'm not a public official, but I am a mom. So maybe this could give me a way to get involved.
And my story actually goes back a lot farther. One of the most profound experiences I ever had, like those things that happen in life where time stood still. For me, it was when I was in kindergarten. That's how far back the impression of gun violence was on me. We were sent home from kindergarten the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. And as a child, watching how profoundly affected all the adults were in my life, because these are people that were like very strong individuals. You didn't see your parents crying. I never saw my father cry. So when you see adults so devastated by a tragedy, you're trying to make sense of that as a child, it's indelible in my mind. I can still see it. And as the years passed and other assassination attempts took place and did take place, and then I became a young adult, I would say middle school, and in my own hometown, a disturbed individual took a gun and went into one of the factories in the town that I grew up in, Pennsylvania, and started to shoot at people. And several people were killed, including a neighbor's father, a friend of mine's father. And to me, it was like, I can't believe that this kind of thing can happen and that we justify it as a right, gun ownership as a right without real responsibility. And so every time I had an opportunity to be a part of a movement that focused on gun violence prevention, I wanted to get involved in that. When my children were in elementary school, a man with an AR-15, I believe it was, I might have that incorrect, but took a weapon onto the playground of a child daycare center at a Jewish community center in California and started shooting. I don't even know for what reason, but that really struck fear in my heart, and I jumped on the bandwagon of an organization. At that time, it was called the Million Moms March. That was in the year 2000. And so many women and fathers and others showed up for that on the mall in Washington. There were 1 million people that did show up to press Congress to do something more to keep us safe and pass stricter gun laws and help keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. I thought at that point we're surely going to be seeing something happen, but nothing did. And then Sandy Hook happened. The grief and anger that came out of Sandy Hook, I believe, and that was 5 years ago, mobilized a whole nation of moms and others. And that's how Molly and we probably were all having the same thought bubble at that same time. We need to do more. We need to do more to protect our children and more to change the culture of guns in our country. So that was 5 years ago, and here we are. Here we are, we are now the largest gun violence prevention organization in the nation, and we are the counterweight to the NRA, which, as most people do know, it pushes a pretty radical agenda of gun ownership, guns anywhere, anytime, no questions asked. And right now they're working on gutting a lot of our gun laws to just basically put a gun in every American's hand as a means of self-protection, which we don't think that's the best policy.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about what Moms does.
So we are a grassroots group, and we have a chapter in every state. And what we do is organize people to advocate for common sense, middle ground solutions to gun violence, not the least of which are stronger laws and policies at the federal and state level that would prevent gun violence by keeping guns out of dangerous hands. So we have initiatives at federal and local levels. Right here in Massachusetts, we have relatively strong laws, and we actually have some of the lowest rates of gun violence in the country to show for that. But there's always more that we can do to prevent further tragedies. And to that end, right now, the Massachusetts legislature is considering a bill that would allow for emergency risk protection orders in our state. So oftentimes, before a mass shooting or a gun suicide, there are warning signs. But up until now, there hasn't been anything that family members could do to help a person that they knew was at risk stay safe from gun violence. But this bill would allow family members to work with health professionals and with law enforcement to petition the courts for a gun restraining order for that person, and remove their access to guns and their ability to purchase new guns while they're in that time of crisis. So advocating for state laws like this that would prevent tragedies are one of the many things MOMS does. We also have other programs that would serve as more educational tools. So for example, one type of gun violence is unintentional child gun deaths. So one scary statistic is that about 1.7 million kids aged 17 and younger live in homes with unsecured loaded guns. So obviously these are just tragedies waiting to happen. And in fact, about every 34 hours in this country, a child dies from a preventable gun death. So we have developed a program that is educational in nature and serves to combat this. It's called Be Smart. So the SMART is an acronym. S stands for storage of guns. M stands for modeling appropriate behavior around guns. A stands for asking about guns in a home before you visit it. And R stands for recognizing the risk of teenage suicide. And T stands for telling others about this. And so there are moms all over the country who will go and present this program at PTA groups or just in homes, at house parties, or to health professionals, and allow people to learn about this possibility and what they can do about it. Really, one of the biggest takeaways from the program is that before your kids go to visit a home, we need to all be asking what is the status of guns in the home, how are they stored, and also make that conversation part of normal parenting, such as like asking about a food allergy before your kids go for a play date, and take away that taboo, because these are gun deaths that are preventable. So Moms Demand Action does all kinds of work in the legislative sphere and also in the educational sphere.
Mm-hmm. What are you doing specifically in your jobs with moms?
So, the organization of moms is to just look at the big picture. Every state is a state chapter. And within the state chapter, there are local groups that are mostly from people who come together in towns and communities, like groups of moms and dads and others who share our concern of making sure that we, have safe gun safety laws and that type of thing. So, in Massachusetts, we have at the state chapter level, which is where Molly and I are. We have several chapter leaders that handle different aspects of our organization. Excuse me, because organizing is one of the reasons why we're so strong right now as a national organization. So I'm the chapter leader, and I kind of like help keep everybody like in the know and updated and growing the membership and that type of thing. And Molly's position is to work with our members on what's happening legislatively. That's at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level, and how we can engage our members in legislation or advocacy work that's taking place on our agenda. And she just mentioned one of those bills that we're going to be actively working on with other gun violence prevention organizations that exist in Massachusetts. We all belong to an organization called the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. So our jobs are to support the local groups that are forming around our state. Our local groups replicate the leadership titles and roles that we have at the state level. And primarily the work that we do is to inform and educate the public about the gun laws that we have in Massachusetts as well as in our nation, and work to improve upon those. As a grassroots organization, we are trying to touch as many voters as possible, because it doesn't matter the work we do if we don't put it into action. And that action for us happens to be, we need to turn out voters, and we need to make sure voters understand who their candidates are and where they stand on the issues that they care most about. So it's truly a good definition of how grassroots organizing works and how we can influence policy to help keep Americans safe.
How does teamwork work both on the Massachusetts level and the national level?
So our national organization has a staff that is, would you say that everytown.org, which is an organization that was started by Mayor Michael Bloomberg, is our primary funding source. I think without the funding, like anything, we wouldn't be able to go as far as we have been able to get. So it's really key that we have that. So we have a pretty major staff at the national level that helps us with policy, legal, keeps us informed, keeps us together, puts together training platforms for us where we can reach up and ask them for their support if we see something happening at our state level that we need their help on. They're there with a legal team, a policy team, a research team, funding, if we need to have, to pay for something to help us get the word out or do the work that we do or support our membership.
What obstacles do you encounter?
Good question.
I say challenges more than obstacles.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Better framing.
Yeah.
Well, right now, some people say that, if a murder of 6-year-olds could not make anything change in this country, then nothing will. And that is not true. That is a belief that we, are coming up against, but it's not the case. So, 5 years ago, when that shooting occurred, there was nothing a stay-at-home mom like myself could do about that. And now at this point, our organization has about 4 million members nationwide, and we give people direct actions that they can take, even out of their homes, even at the local level, that could contribute to gun violence being reduced. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we work on this every day, and we're winning many of the battles at the state level. And we have more strength than ever before. Our voices are louder. But I would say that belief is something that is an obstacle that we're trying to counter at this point.
We've had so many successes, though, in the last 5 years on many different, legislative issues where I hesitate to always say the NRA, but the pro-gun lobby or the NRA has a very radical agenda that they're pushing. And you know, this agenda is primarily, you know, even our representatives in Washington represent it's a minority view on something that the majority of Americans support, background checks. And something that Molly had said earlier, with, you know, rights come responsibilities. And over 90% of Americans believe that. You know, we all have automobiles. We all have, you know, small appliances, tools, all kinds of things, fireplaces. And around every single one of these things that we use in our society, we have safety rules and regulations. And we believe, as, you know, Americans, that that's helpful to us. So we feel the same way about our, you know, guns, and we should have, you know, laws that support safety and help to keep guns out of the hands of the most dangerous people. So across the nation, some of the, you know, we call it gutting of gun laws that's taken place are where we've been able to counterbalance that and make sure that these laws didn't get passed, are things like closing loopholes on background checks so that we can, you know, we do see the statistics now falling out from our advocacy on this, that simple background checks saves lives. And I don't know exactly the statistic, but it's in the millions, where a background check has prevented a gun sale to somebody who really shouldn't have the gun. And that's, you know, criminals, gang members, domestic abusers, you know, people who are most likely to do harm with a firearm. In many states across the country in the last 5 years, we've been able to have legislation passed that keeps guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but every month 50 women are shot and killed by their domestic, in a domestic partnership situation. Now we're trying to extend that law where we can also help to keep a gun out of it's called the boyfriend loophole. So typically it's in a marriage situation, but now we're saying, you know, not everybody needs to be married to be in danger of having a gun used against them in an issue of domestic violence. So our agenda has taken that cause up, and it's a state-by-state thing that we go in and we try to get these laws passed in different states. Another one that I think, because I have college-age kids, that a lot of my friends, I've been able to educate them on, is that the NRA has gone into states and tried to have laws passed that would allow college campuses, students to bring guns onto college campus, or anybody to carry a gun on a college campus. And often college campuses will have their own rules around these things. And they'd say no, but the state gun laws would actually supersede that, and it would allow for college students to have guns on campus. Well, for those people who have college-age students, the mix of just young minds, alcohol, fun times, other things that can come up, it's a very dangerous mix, and we've been bringing that forward and trying to counterbalance the argument of self-protection or whatever it might be to allow people to have guns on college campuses. More disturbing are efforts to arm and allow people to bring guns into K through 12, into our schools as a means of self-protection. We've defeated many attempts at passing laws in states for that. Is there anything else that on a national level? I think we have 2 bills right now that we're trying to make sure do not advance. Do you want to talk about those 2?
Yeah, sure. Recently, there was a vote in the United States House in favor of allowing concealed carry reciprocity, acronym CCR.
You'll have to explain that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So what that means is any state that has given someone a license to carry a gun in a concealed way, then would be able to, under this law, take that gun into any other state and carry it in that way for which they obtain the original license. The problem is that there are many states with extremely weak laws, and no background checks are done to check to see if they have a criminal record, to see if they have been judged in a court of law as dangerously mentally ill, and they also, many states don't require any training whatsoever before they give someone a concealed carry license in their state. And so places like Massachusetts would be very much at risk for having people who are not deemed suitable to have a gun in our state be able to carry them in a concealed way throughout the country. And so we've been fighting hard against that. That actually passed the United States House not long ago. It hasn't come up for a vote in the Senate, but we are advocating vigorously against that. And it's come up before in the United States government and in the United States Congress, and it passed by a smaller margin this time. So, we believe that politicians are starting to hear that their constituents don't want these free and easy situations, guns for everyone all the time. We're feeling unsafe by the epidemic of gun violence that's on the news every single morning. And, so politicians are starting to hear the message that there should be background checks, that there should be other laws in place that keep guns out of dangerous hands. We are not against the Second Amendment. We support the Second Amendment. But with all rights come responsibilities, and there are limits to every right. And so, we believe there should be common sense, middle ground solutions that would keep dangerous people from having guns, and fighting concealed carry reciprocity is one of them.
And to add to that one, there's another bill that would make it a federal law to legalize silencers. And that type of an accessory to a firearm, we feel strongly, given the types of mass shootings that take place, for law enforcement to be able to locate, a shooter, and they have, like the bump stock that was used at Las Vegas. These types of accessories we just find irresponsible and only lend themselves to more deaths, and it's going backwards. So we fight hard against those types of things as well.
Can you explain what a bump stock is?
Well, the bump stock is a device that turns a firearm into a more rapid fire. Like, I'm not an expert on these things, mm-hmm. but it allows a firearm to fire off more shots than it would do without that accessory. And then, of course, the silencer or suppressor suppresses the sound that a gun makes when it's being fired. So it makes it more difficult to first realize that a gun is being fired and where it might be being fired from. So these are all things that not only are they dangerous in our society and for our people, it makes it even harder for law enforcement to keep people safe. So until we get to a place where we can really perhaps regulate these things where we can keep ourselves safe and they are in the hands of right people, responsible people, that's where we kind of draw the line of, should we be going down that path until we get everything else kind of squared away as well. So,
what are the most satisfying accomplishments you've had, both in terms of the movement and in terms of yourselves in the movement?
Well, I think one really satisfying win has been the success of the Wear Orange movement. So Wear Orange was inspired by a girl named Heidi Pendleton, who was a teenager in Chicago killed by random gunfire just a few weeks after she actually marched in President Obama's inaugural parade. And her friends got together and they wanted to honor her. So they decided that they would all wear orange on June 2nd, which would have been her birthday. And they told others to do the same. Orange, of course, is the color that hunters wear in the woods to designate human life and to protect themselves. Well, that whole movement has grown incredibly. And actually, June 2nd is now becoming a National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And there have now become, there are hundreds of partner organizations and corporations and mayors and celebrities who have taken part, wearing orange and sharing those photos on social media. And then there have been iconic landmarks all over the country that have lit up orange on June 2nd. For example, here in the Northeast, the Empire State Building lit up orange on June 2nd, and the Rhode Island State House. And we've had some very successful events here in Boston for National Gun Violence Awareness Day. On June 2nd, we have asked the Zakim Bridge to turn orange, and TD Garden, among other landmarks. And we've had some really successful events and rallies. We've had Congressman Mike Capuano come and speak at our rallies. We've had Boston Police Commissioner Bill Evans. We've had Attorney General Maura Healey come and take part. So those have been really amazing events, and it's felt very satisfying to be able to honor that young girl's life, which was senselessly taken by a gun. But it's been able to raise awareness for the cause and honor her life at the same time. So that's been really a great experience.
So for me, I agree with Molly. Like, the events that we do to raise awareness and visibility have been extremely satisfying, because we see so much support coming from not only our membership, others, but also the public in general learns more about us, and we often see a huge increase in interest and people joining the movement. But for me, I consider myself a lifelong activist, so it's being able to help people understand how they can engage in the political process. It's great. It's extremely gratifying to know that you are changing policy and law, and the result of that is saving lives. And so to be able to work, as Molly mentioned, alongside of our Attorney General Maura Healey, who is an awesome champion for gun safety. She, out of the gate, has been very vocal about her support for gun safety, and going and doing everything that she can, using her office as the Attorney General to make sure that Massachusetts remains one of the top 2 to 5 states in the country that has the best responsible gun laws and very responsible gun owners. So we're kind of, we like to say Massachusetts first. We do a lot of things first, and we definitely as a state lead in that as well. But to be able to help citizens, especially in light of how our political climate now, understand how to become involved in the legislative process, the advocacy work, to be an activist, to be a citizen activist, and give people a channel to learn how to do that, and work alongside of key legislators at the federal level and the state level, become friends with these people. They count on us, we count on them to be able to sit down and work together and help form public policy and legislation is extremely gratifying. So I invite anybody out there watching or listening that feels like they don't have a voice, they can't do anything, things are helpless. I defy that. We all have that opportunity. You just need to find the lane that you want to be in, the cause that's near and dear to you. Find a group that is working, doing advocacy work, grassroots activism, join it, and you will see that we can definitely shape our country into being the country that we want it to be. We just have to be a participant in the process.
Are there other misconceptions besides we can't do anything and nothing pushes things forward floating around in terms of gun violence or legislation?
No, I think we've proven, our organization has proven in the last 5 years that, I always laugh, I mean, I think I heard our founder, Shannon Watts, comment, you know, there's nothing, once a type A mom sets a plan in motion, there's no going back. We don't go back, we only go forward. So, I think we're, you know, we are the people who join this movement, who take part in it, whether it's 5 minutes that they can spare, 5 hours, 5 days, 50 hours, whatever it is, there's you know, there's work there for them, there's a place for them. I don't see any negatives. I don't see anything that can get in the way of good people who want to see a better place for everybody moving forward. And having the camaraderie and the support of each other is extremely uplifting and empowering.
And they can find us at momsdemandaction.org.
Momsdemandaction.org and everytown.org are 2 places. You could just Google Moms Demand Action or Google Everytown. Both of those websites have a join component to them, and if you in Massachusetts click on that and just fill out the form, we eventually will call you and welcome you at the state level. If you got your cell phone handy right now and you want to text JOIN to 64433, a form will come up and you can fill that out, and it goes into we have a national welcome call team. Eventually you'll get a call from us and they'll connect you to Molly or me or other people in our state chapter, and we invite you to come to a new member meeting and learn more about us, ask questions, and see where you might fit in. And some people are supporters from the sidelines, and that's great. Some people like to just donate, that's awesome. And other people like to take action. And that's great too. So there's a place for everybody, and a task for everybody, and a call to action. And it feels really great when you get off the phone with a legislator, having just said to them, you know, that bill that's coming down from the Judiciary Committee, we want you to oppose it or support it or whatever, and know that your voice is directly being heard by who matters.
Are there other misconceptions that you could clear up for our viewers?
Well, I would say one misconception is that, you know, we are all about gun control, and we don't think that term fits what we're trying to do, because we are not trying to take away guns or gun rights from responsible, law-abiding citizens. You know, we want to advocate for gun safety and gun violence prevention, and you know, so. If people fear that, that's not what we're about. We support the Second Amendment, you know, but there are middle ground, common sense solutions that everyone wants to see happening, because the epidemic of gun violence is out of control. It's you know, 94 people, I believe, every single day are killed with a gun in our country. It's approaching the number of car accidents every single day. And so there's got to be more we can do, and we can work together. We can find common ground where we all agree that more can be done to save lives. So I would say a misconception would be that, you know, we are you know, stubborn and think that the Second Amendment shouldn't exist, and that's not true. We want to work together with people of all backgrounds, if they also agree with us that more could be done to prevent gun deaths. And we're actually apolitical in that way. Our organization will support any candidate, whether they be Democrat or Republican, if they are proponents of gun violence prevention bills and legislation. You know, so we're open to partnering with lots of different people and organizations around that same task of saving lives.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea where gun owners stand on this? Have there been polls or interviews and stuff?
Yes, a poll was done. It's escaping me right now who did it. But a poll was actually done of gun owners, and the statistic is somewhere in the 70 to 80% of gun owners, responsible gun owners, support our agenda. They also believe that. And I can tell you just from even in Massachusetts, when we do tabling events, often people, gun owners will come up and they have a lot of questions for us based on what Molly was saying, that somebody, the opposition likes to peddle information like we're all about taking your guns away and getting rid of guns and that type of thing. So we're constantly having to remind people, no, we support the Second Amendment and your right to own a gun and all of that. So I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought on what was I answering on the first part you asked me.
You were discussing the polls of gun owners and how they feel about your position.
Yes, so that the statistic is quite high on, thank you, a senior moment. The statistic is quite high that gun owners also support the agenda that we tend to put out there, which is, like Molly's been saying, it's a moderate, reasonable and responsible laws around gun ownership and use of guns in our country. So
now, if somebody who is in favor of gun violence prevention wanted to engage in conversation with someone else and see if there was common ground in terms of supporting a position. I know I attended a workshop where you helped present the do's and don'ts of engaging people and having your 40-second elevator conversation with someone. It might be worth sharing.
Well, I can just tell you, and Molly, you may have, add your experiences to this. I never like to have an argument around this. There is common ground, and I think I was starting to say just, a minute ago, when I do tabling events, when our group gets together and we do farmers markets or, other organizations or Indivisible where we're there with our materials and we're talking to people and people come up and they start asking questions. Usually the opposition will come up, they have really misinformation about who we are and what we do and what we stand for, and we have a conversation about it. We always look to find the common ground. How do you feel about the Second Amendment? I do too. What do you think about gun owners having to be permitted? In Massachusetts, most gun owners will say, I think that's a really smart thing, we should be doing that. How do you feel about keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous people? Yes, we do agree with that. So we start down this path of yes, we do, yes, we do, yes, we're on the same page, we're on the same page. And I think that we break down barriers, we clear up any misconceptions, and usually, in my experience, by the end of the conversation, we have reached that common ground, that middle place where we know we can work together. We've exchanged cards, information. I've been invited, I don't own a gun, but I've been invited to more than a few gun training courses, to firing ranges. And that was towards the end of the summer, this past summer, and I'm like, I'll see you next time around, but I'm looking forward to it because I think I need to do that. I need to also go and stretch myself and see, what goes on in those classes and what's being trained and how people are responding and that type of thing. And that just helps us all. The more we know, the more we can come to a consensus and agreement and work together on it instead of being polarized, which doesn't get us anywhere. We're seeing that. Mm-hmm. So,
I think people don't realize how ludicrous the lack of laws are in some of the parts of the country. So, for example, it is perfectly legal for someone on the no-fly list to be able to purchase a firearm in this country. They can go to a licensed gun dealer, and they can pass a background check. I mean, most people think that's a bad idea. but it is legal.
What is no-fly?
So, you know, the Federal Aviation Authority has a list of people that they are concerned may have terrorist ties, and they would be on a list of people who are not allowed to board an airplane. But those people are allowed to buy guns legally. And, you know, there are many of these types of gaps in our laws that really most people would agree are not good practice. Background checks to see if a person has a criminal record, to see if they have been adjudicated as criminally mentally ill, to see if they have a restraining order against them, are not required for private sales in many states. And you know that most people, if you ask them, think that is a bad idea, and it is a bad idea. And so, you know, common sense, middle ground solutions exist. It's just our lawmakers in Washington need to have the courage to enact those.
Right. To actually vote in support of what the majority of Americans have all agreed upon. So we're out here doing the work that they should be doing, and that is bringing people together around an issue like, you know, the prevalence of gun violence and gun death in our country, and finding common sense solutions that will save lives and just make our country better than it already is in that respect. And hopefully next time around we'll get there. So.
Do you find that people buy the justifications that I have often heard, for instance, with the shooting in the Baptist church in Texas, that this is a mental health issue? And I hear other arguments from people that the criminals and the mentally ill can get a hold of guns anyway, and gun laws would prevent people from protecting themselves from that element?
Well, the research does not bear any of those arguments out. Other developed countries in the world have exactly the same amount of mental illness as we do, but our nation has 25 times the firearm homicide rate as other developed nations at this point. So that just really doesn't make sense. And research shows that higher rates of gun ownership result in higher rates of gun deaths. And none of those arguments play out. There have been virtually no clear examples of people who are saving someone because they happen to be carrying a gun. People aren't, the average citizen isn't trained to respond in that way when there is a mass shooting. So we just think that guns should be in the hands of people who have been trained, who have had background checks, and who have that role in our society. And when there are just guns everywhere with no restrictions, there's more gun violence.
Has that ever backfired? Somebody unprepared has a gun and then they whip it out and there's a confrontation?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah.
Has somebody bringing a gun out who's really not trained to use it and to respond to an emergency actually created a larger problem?
I think it's been reported by the people responsible gun owners who have been in places like, I know I've heard somebody speak to this at the Aurora Theater shooting. There were people in all of these situations who were licensed, carrying guns. They were licensed, they were permitted, they were responsible gun owners, and they're telling us that when that happens, the last thing you're thinking about is how you're going to intercede and fix the situation. Usually it's fight or flight. They're either helping the person they're with, or they're trying to make sure that they're safe. Then they don't know who the person with the gun is. That is the person that needs to be addressed or subdued or taken down or whatever it is. So you don't know in those situations, who should I be targeting if I'm trying to save everybody else in the room or in this place. So that's where we find people need to think through the logic of whether or not they're actually going to be protecting themselves and saving other people's lives, because all this other, you know, these other decisions come into play that in a chaotic situation that you don't know if you're going to be hurting somebody that's innocent or somebody that's causing harm or damage and destruction. So, yeah.
Typically, law enforcement officials say that it makes it more difficult for them when there are sort of, you know,
Active
vigilantes
shooters, yeah.
trying to get involved. You know, so we just think that guns belong in the hands of people who are trained to have them.
Pardon the pun, but I think we've shot our hour. So, I want to thank Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America for sharing this hour with us, and we'll see you next time.